This conference will now be recorded.
And with that, I will call the meeting to order. First, that first order of business. Second one, if we were in person, I would be pointing out the emergency exits, but you all know where you are and you all know how to get out of where you are if you've got an emergency. To the committee, declarations of pecuniary interest. If you have any at this point in time, please declare them, or at any other point in time during the meeting, please. Again, to the committee, approval of our agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Barbara, seconded by John. Please, anybody opposed to that? Then we're all in agreement with that. So the agenda is approved. Secondly, approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was March 2nd of 2021. To the committee, any comments, questions, anything that we need to change on here? Diane?
Just one small one. In the very end, my name was spelled wrong. There's no H, but it's minor.
Okay, so Susan will, I'll let you sort that out. Oh, that, yes, on the last page. So we'll get Susan to correct that. Thank you, Diane. Not seeing any other comments about that. Can I have somebody who will move that we approve these minutes, please? John, seconded by Jerry. And again, anybody opposed to that? Seeing none, then the minutes of our last meeting are approved. Point number 6 on our agenda is public question period. I'm assuming that all of our guests here are members of the CVCA. I don't think we have any public here, Susan, is that correct? No, so public question period moves pretty fast then. With that, we're going to move into our public meeting, which is the Credit Valley Conservation Delegation to the Planning, Environment, Natural Heritage Committee of Mono. And it's regarding the new 25-year management plan for the Island Lake Conservation Area. So with that, David, I don't think you need to make any introduction here. I think it's pretty straightforward. Would you agree? David?
Yeah, I wasn't really waiting for me, Bob, for sure. So, I mean, there's a pretty fulsome package here that CVC's prepared. You know, there's a draft guiding statement, the site plan, the conceptual plan, the trail plan, the resource management plan. There was a memorandum, oh gosh, what's the date of that memorandum? From May 12th, sorry, that went to committee and yourself that outlined what the proposal and presentation would be. And I think with that, I can forward it on to either Kate and or Laura for, and Bill, I suppose, for presentation. I mean, the only thing I would say from a high level aspect on the town's position is that it's, you know, designated as green natural, greenbelt natural area under the greenbelt plan, and it's zoned OS open space.
Very good. Kate, I'll turn that over. Are you going to start this up then, please?
Yeah, so I hope you can hear me okay. And I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully with you all. To share screen, ask organizer to make presenter. Okay, great. And that's coming through for everybody?
I have it. Everybody else, yes? Very good.
Okay, great. So first and foremost, thank you to the members of the committee for receiving our delegation this evening. My name is Kate Burgess. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a conservation lands planner with CVC and the project manager for the Island Lake Management Plan. With me are my colleagues, Eric Balden, Manager of Land Planning and Management, Bill Lidster, Manager of Conservation Parks, and Laura Rundle, who's the Conservation Lands Planner and leading engagement for this project. So an overview of our presentation this evening, I'm just going to share very high level, very high level planning context from a provincial, municipal, and CVC perspective. I'll then share a little bit more about Island Lake Conservation Area, its significance from an ecological and social perspective, as well as some of the biggest pressures that the management plan will seek to respond to. I'm going to then review our phased approach to planning for the park's future, some of the key milestones of developing the management plan, and then walk through some of the key plan elements that have been shared with the public stakeholders and the committee. Lastly, I'll touch on some next steps of what sort of lies ahead as we develop the plan and move on to approvals, and then we can open it up for questions. I'll also say that the presentation runs about 20 minutes, so I hope that that's okay for the committee. So from a planning context, I just wanted to start at the very top. So under the Conservation Authorities Act, conservation and management of lands owned or controlled by a conservation authority is considered a mandatory program and service. It may be funded by a number of different mechanisms, including provincial grants, self-generated revenues, and municipal levy, of course. Within the Credit River watershed, we are the public stewards of a system of conservation areas that stretch from the shores of Lake Ontario northward to the headwaters of the Credit River in Dufferin County. Since our first land acquisition in 1957, we've acquired nearly 300 parcels of land that make up 62 conservation areas and just over 28 hectares of land. In 2020, we welcomed over 1 million visitors for the first time to our publicly accessible conservation areas. And across our conservation areas, we are classified them into one of 3 different classes that differ in characteristics such as the sensitivity of the natural features, the appropriateness to offer recreation and visitor experiences, and the level of staffing and infrastructure required. From within our own organization, there's a number of different strategies and plans that shape management plans for our conservation areas. We start at the top on the top left here with our strategic plan for the organization that provides direction to complete management plans for our conservation areas. Our most recent strategic plan, our feature taking shape, outlines Island Lake Conservation Area as a priority to have a management plan completed. Then we move on to our Conservation Areas Master Strategy, which is our guiding document for planning for and managing our lands. It identifies the activities and investments needed to create self-sustaining, unique, and high-quality recreational, cultural, and educational experiences that meet not only the needs of our visitors today, but into the future. There's also a long list of strategies and plans for climate change, Credit Valley Trail, invasive species, sustainable forests that will guide projects, actions, and outcomes in the management plan. You'll see a lot of these reflected in the outcomes and actions in the guiding statements. And they're aiming to build things like more resilience to climate change and lessening our carbon footprint, connecting Island Lake to the Credit Valley Trail. That's that vision of a 100-kilometer trail through the Credit River Valley from the headwaters or Island Lake to Port Credit in the south. It also looks at allowing for mechanisms for allowing for early detection of invasive species like the emerald ash borer. Things that detected early can really lessen the impacts on our natural system. So all of that to say that there's a number of different internal strategies and plans that are integrated into the overall guiding statements for the project, for the park rather. As David mentioned, from the town of Mono's official plan side of things, approximately 85% of Island Lake falls within the town of Mono, and I don't think it's not unexpected that these lands also fall within the town's natural heritage system, which is consistent with the Greenbelt Natural Heritage System where it applies. We also understand that development or any site alteration must not adversely affect the natural features or their ecological functions. And throughout the planning process for developing this park management plan, we are working very closely with our planning and ecology staff to ensure that we have an ecological net gain through any park development. From the zoning bylaw, as David also mentioned, the conceptual site plan proposes development within the open space designation. The predominant land uses in areas designated open space and identified natural heritage areas shall be recreation and conservation uses. So just moving in on to Island Lakes more specifically, it was created obviously back in the 1967 with the creation of two dams that really created the reservoir in Island Lake, and the park opened to the public in 1970. It is 329 hectares in size, and the lake, wetlands, forests, and meadows play an important ecological role in protecting the headwaters of the Credit and Nottawasaga rivers. There have been over 600 species recorded on site, including 12 species at risk, and some of the significant natural heritage features include the provincially significant wetland that is Island Lake itself, and significant wildlife habitat and significant woodlands, which are outlined in the official plan as well. From the social perspective, Island Lake contributes significantly to the health and well-being of our watershed communities. It has seen remarkable increases in visitation over the last 6 years, receiving 272,000 visits in 2020. But it's important to acknowledge that 76% of our of our visiting population is accessing the trails through our secondary access points. Fishing, hiking, canoe kayaking, and social gatherings are popular activities at the park, as are some of our community events, like our fishing derbies in February and July, the Maple Syrup Festival, some Canada Day celebration, and amphitheater events, including the Theatre Orangeville Presents. We also have Learn To experiences like Learn to Fish, and wellness series like Yoga in the Park, which are popular. From outdoor education, it's been really a focus of Island Lake since the 1970s. The Upper Grand District School Board and a number of third parties run outdoor education programming and environmental focused education programs throughout the year. It's also, I don't think needs to be said, that it is a beloved park by our local communities. The Friends of Island Lake service clubs like the Rotary Clubs of Orangeville and Orangeville Highlands and Orangeville Lions Club and others have generously fundraised to better the park for their communities. So as we look towards the park's future and the success of the management plan that we're developing, it's really going to be measured about how well it's protecting our key values and responding to some key pressures that range from things like environmental pressures, like the fluctuating water levels that are common now, invasive species, as I mentioned, the emerald ash borer, climate change, to visitor experiences, so crowding, competition for rental equipment and parking, and economic pressures like sustainable revenues to reinvest in park infrastructure, staffing, and programming. We also consider the class of conservation area that Island Lake is and what that means for guiding future activities. As I mentioned before, there's 3 classes in our parks classification system. We have our Credit Valley parks, where our most active recreation and amenities are offered. We have our conservation lands, which are typically provide sort of limited passive recreation, for Bruce Trail, for example. And we have our nature reserves, where public access is not permitted at all, and the primary objective would be protection of the natural features and functions. Island Lake is a Credit Valley park, and that's a destination park that provides a variety of active and passive nature-based recreation opportunities. It would have revenue generation potential. It would have significant infrastructure and amenities to support the active and passive recreation activities. Staffing levels generally range from daily dedicated gate and service staff, much like you see at Island Lake, to part-time staffing that you would see at like the Cheltenham Badlands, for example. We have our operating season, which is generally year-round, which for the most part at Island Lake it is, with the Vicky Barron Lakeside Trail being open 12 months of the year. And then each park would have its own brand identity and marketing tactics that are appropriate to the activities offered there. Takes a while for this slide to load. There we go. So as we look back at where we've come from, a lot of the existing park infrastructure, like the rental center and education center, has been in place since the early 1970s, or in the case of the rental, actually quite beyond that. And so they're nearing or at the end of their asset life cycle. So as we start to plan for the next 25 years, it was important that we really assess not only what our current needs are, but also what we anticipate for the long-term future for the park. So in collaboration with some of our fundraising partners like the Friends of Island Lake and service clubs, as I mentioned, we've added a few new visitor amenities in recent years. We have the Vicky Barron Lakeside Trail, of course. We have the amphitheater and the natural playground, and the 2 new open air pavilions. Both the playground and the pavilions were added last year. But what remains are really the investments in our larger park facilities that are, for a number of reasons, recommended for replacement. The Island Lake is one of 3 field office locations for our staff. We have Warwick and Terracotta conservation areas are the other 2. And staff on site have been operating out of trailers for over a decade. So workshops, equipment, materials, storage have been scattered sort of, ad hoc throughout the park. And we really want to sort of bring that into more of a centralized administrative operations area. The education center is just, the repairs needed over the next 25 years exceed its replacement cost, and it just is not really comfortably able to accommodate 2 classes that visit it from the Upper Grand District School Board programming. The rental center is the garage from the old farmhouse that we acquired, is original since we acquired it, and its size and amenities are just not sufficient for either staff or the visitor needs in that area. And then the gatehouse, which really is its situation and is a barrier to the recreating that sort of park entry improvements that we want to see to alleviate some things like the vehicles queuing outside the park. So in terms of like our planning approach to the management plan, we sort of broke this down into 4 phases of work. So we of course start with our situation analysis, really understanding the status of what we need, what the status is of what we need to accomplish, and the characterization of the ecological, cultural, and social values or characteristics, as well as the values and pressures, understanding from a policy and planning perspective what that context, how it influences the project and the property, and then a recommendation. So just high-level recommendations and sometimes very detailed recommendations that really get carried forward into the beginning of the planning process. So it's a good starting point and situation analysis. And so then we move into management planning where we are now, and it's where we start to establish our park class and our zoning, our guiding statements, so our vision, objectives, outcomes, and directions, as well as our concepts, which are developed in parallel. This then leaves the way, once we have sort of an agreement and approval of our vision and concepts, we then can commence more onto the implementation side of the management plan. And so this is where you would see a lot of the detailed level, site level planning, the site plan agreement preparation. So doing the pre-design investigations like servicing, geotechnical, environmental site assessments, archaeology, doing more preliminary design, so taking that concepts and drilling it down and refining it into more detailed design, and then the planning justification report, all required as part of that site plan agreement. And then that would move into the design, permitting, and construction phase for, I would say, phase 1 development. So we know that this is going to, over 25 years, it's going to need a phased approach. And so we would be phasing our master planning and design, permitting, and construction phases accordingly. And so in terms of the management plan phase that we're in now, the planning process is a 2-year process that began early in 2020. So we really worked to scope the project and develop that phased approach that I just spoke about. We developed the communications plan, understanding what audiences should be engaged, when they should be engaged, how we're going to engage them, which was really important, especially under the COVID pandemic. And we established our stakeholder and technical committees. We then held our first meetings with our committees in the fall and onboarded consultants for conceptual design, so landscape architect and an architect. We also completed our first public engagement in the fall, delivering a neighborhood mail out to over 3,000 nearby neighbors and launched an online public survey. In the winter, we held design workshops with staff and community stakeholders to brainstorm ideas for Island Lake's future. Ideas were shared around programming, events, partnerships, education, and site interpretation. And we also worked behind the scenes to analyze all that we know about Island Lake Conservation Area and really what the new management plan needed to accomplish. So now we're here sort of well into spring, and we are undertaking a series of consultations with staff, our stakeholders, and the public. Input received from these consultations will help us to revise and refine our guiding statements and concepts, and then we'll start to prepare and draft the management plan, which I will sort of share the next steps for that later in the presentation. So our vision for Island Lake, and this was included in the guiding statements, is one of a really resilient environment that nurtures the health and well-being of our communities, connects people to nature and culture, and inspires an appreciation for the headwaters of the Credit River. So when we drafted this vision statement for Island Lake and looking through the words used by the public and stakeholders to describe what Island Lake means to them, what they value, a few things sort of stood out to us. And one is that caring for the natural environment is front and center on people's mind. A diminishing natural environment diminishes visitor experiences, and we are committed at CVC to being thoughtful and principled land stewards. Number two, visitor proportion is weighted heavily to the trail access points, so the Vicky Barron Lakeside Trail in particular. And it's very clear that not only do people visit Island Lake for recreation generally, but they visit as part of their daily routine for their own health and well-being. And third is that as an organization at CVC, we are connectors. Ultimately, we connect people to nature and we provide opportunities for people to immerse themselves in the natural environment. I'm not going to go into the draft objectives for the management plan in detail, as these were included in the review package, but I did want to share that the 5 objectives describe what the management plan aims to accomplish, and they closely align with a number of the strategic directions that both internally and a number of the strategies that I shared earlier, as well as externally, as we heard from the public and stakeholders what they would like to see in the plan. Under each objective, there is a series of outcomes and directions, and collectively, these guiding statements are the roadmap for the 25-year plan for Island Lake. There's also 2 supporting strategies that were included in your package. We're developing the restoration and natural resource management plan. This is really just a high-level plan that's going to outline priorities for staff and partners to implement to really focus strengthening the natural system. The second strategy is the trail plan, and this is really just focused on identifying projects that will improve the trail system. It's an incredibly valued recreational amenity for the property, and there's a number of different recommendations to improve from visit experience or accessibility, and so those will be outlined in the trail plan. And lastly, we just wanted to touch on some of the big ideas being considered for the park, and this is reflected in our concepts. Working through workshops with stakeholders and staff, all of this sort of rolled up into some big ideas, and the big ideas are really focused on consolidating and replacing the buildings. So the new infrastructure that's going to better service the park in the long term, increasing access to water. So much of the current prime water side in the park is currently used for parking cars, and we would much prefer the space be used for visitors. And improving roads and wayfinding. It can be confusing to navigate to different areas of the park, different parking lots, different focused activity areas. So improving that is an idea as well. Rationalizing parking. Right now, we don't have sufficient parking that services the day-to-day needs of the different activity areas. We often end up using more the overflow areas as day-to-day, parking areas. So wanting to rationalize and expand upon the parking is a priority for the plan. We also want to provide additional capacity for some of the really high demand activities like picnics and pavilion rentals. As well, we want to improve the trails for visitor experience and accessibility, as I just spoke about. So this slide just shows you the facilities plan. So I mentioned before the replacement of 4 key facilities. The visitor center would replace the rental center, the education center replacement, the maintenance facility, which replaces the office trailers, and the gatehouse, which would be a replacement and situation just south of its current location. The new enclosed pavilion, which is sort of more central to my screen, is a direct replacement of an existing enclosed pavilion. And then proposed here would be a new open area radio-free pavilion in area 6 to the right of the screen. So Laura also did include in your package a summary of the comments that we received on these materials. We did receive 556 responses to our online survey, and overall the concept plan was quite well received by our survey respondents. Over 80% strongly approved or approved of the overall concept for Island Lake, and 3% disapproved or strongly disapproved. The proposal for a new visitor center was generally well received. The majority of respondents noted that they would use washrooms, the rental center, and information provided at the visitor center, which isn't surprising because those are amenities already offered at the rental center and area. When asked about an indoor space, because we were considering a second story, indoor multi-use space, if that was something that they would benefit their experience. 44% said that they may attend organized park activities events there, but 42% said they didn't think that they would use that space. Some of the other comments that we received from the public and stakeholders reflected the desire for sustainable development, so that any development doesn't come at the expense of the environment, integrating things like green infrastructure and low impact development. I apologize if you can hear my 2-year-old screaming in the background. Ecological net gain as a principle is important to everybody, and you'll see that this is reflected in our guiding statements as a direction under the protection objective. Rises in visitation is a concern. However, CVC is well equipped under our lands monitoring program to evaluate visitor use patterns over time that inform visitor management strategies. And we're well positioned to not only quantify and understand how people are using the property, but we can adapt our management strategies accordingly. And some question was, how will we achieve the proposed concepts and prioritize what happens first? And that's just simply a conversation we haven't quite gotten down to. We're still sort of developing the concept. But sort of over the summer months, we'll start to engage with our stakeholders and staff and start to sort of develop that phasing plan, because obviously it's going to be phased over multiple phases of work over the 25-year lifespan of the management plan. And then other questions were around user fees, and if we were going to increase our user fees in result of some of the proposed concept projects. And the answer to that is really that CVC Board of Directors sets our fee schedule for our parks. As a nonprofit organization, we use our user fees to reduce our reliance on levy funding and offset our park operating and management costs. But as a nonprofit organization, we're not in this to make a profit, and we certainly don't use investments in visitor experiences to drive our user fees. From CVC's planning and development services perspective, staff have been consulted throughout this process and are members of our technical committee. Some of the comments that we heard from planning staff is their preference is to situate the visitor center outside the wetland buffers, but they do acknowledge that the nature of water-based recreation and the rental program is situated directly along the shores of Island Lake and is within an existing building envelope. The Vicky Barron Lakeside Trail and waterfront parking lot is suitable nesting habitat for snapping turtles, which is significant wildlife habitat and a species at risk. And so it is important that as we work with our ecology staff to avoid and mitigate those any potential impacts once as we look to restore the waterfront parking lot to open space and relocate the public canoe kayak storage area to the water side as well. Lastly, the Credit Valley Trail and the realignment of the Vicky Barron Lakeside Trail proposal. One of the things they mentioned is it will require like a detailed environmental impacts study. And I think that goes without saying that that's something that we would entertain and undertake for a variety of the projects in the park. So that's not unexpected. So wrapping it up here, just to go over next steps, the Planning, Environment, Natural Heritage Committee, we had submitted those materials to the committee on May 12th and have requested comments by June 24th. We are in the late stages of consultations and are well on our way to integrating feedback into the revised guiding statements and concepts, but I do understand that the committee has some concerns with meeting this deadline, so I'm sure we can discuss that after the presentation. And then we'll work over the summer to draft the management plan once we're able to revise those two key elements. And then we'll undertake a second round of robust consultations in September with a final management plan submission to our board in December. And hopefully we'll start to commence municipal council endorsements in the beginning of 2022. So with that, my presentation is concluded and I'm happy to take questions.
Sorry, let me unmute that. Thank you for that, Kate. Very comprehensive. So, committee, John, I'm going to start with you, please, because you had sent us a pretty comprehensive list of things that you considered with this. So I'll let you ask some questions and that may help focus all the rest of us, please.
Thank you, Bob. There's a lot of detail that's been presented to us. I'll try and restrict myself to 5 or 6 higher level pieces. So first off, I just like to say how much I like and am impressed by the present Island Lake Conservation Area, especially its trail system. Now, that said, I am used to, because of the organization that I have retired from, I'm used to natural area management plans that have, along with each committed activity, sound approximations of cost based on some sort of cost benefit analysis, scheduling, timing, and priority. And I just want to say that I'm a little unnerved and made nervous by this draft strategic plan about the next 25 years because of the lack of costing, scheduling, timing, and priorities that I see in this particular work. So just to give you a couple of examples here, if I scan through, on the one pager called Restoration and Natural Resource Management Opportunities, legend only, no text, I think I counted 22 what you call opportunities. So these are not commitments to doing things. These are called opportunities. If I go on to the site plan, there's something in the order of well over 100 individual mapped action items. And then if I look at the guiding statements and I count them up, there's something in the order of 38 individual directions. So not actions, not opportunities, but directions, which direction I find is a word that's almost as vague as opportunities. So taken in total, that's 170 odd separate, developments, directions, and opportunities. And at this point, none of them with costing or scheduling, timing, or priorities attached to them. This really makes me nervous at a time when there's a provincial working group undertaking a review of conservation authority roles and responsibilities. So this this lack of specificity and costing well, one of the things that alerted me too was the fact that one of the province's key directives, and in this I quote the Honorable Urick, the Minister of Environment and Conservation and Parks, in an email to me on the 11th of January of this year, that one of his key directives to the working group was to refocus on natural hazard management. So I do recall that Island Lake was established, to ensure summer downstream flow in the credit, in part to dilute pollution, downstream pollution, and to serve as a flood control, for flood control. So there's a big gap here on water management. I mean, and if the provinces is driving conservation authorities back towards core water management responsibilities, what I read that as code for is there will be almost no money except for municipal levies and gate receipts to meet these 170 odd developments, directions, and opportunities. So that's a little preach, for which I don't apologize. I take very seriously that I think money is going to be tight moving forward, especially for the environment, and noting that provincial expenditures on anything to do with the environment at all now is significantly less than 1% of annual expenditures and declining annually. So costing and scheduling and priorities become even more important.
Sorry, John, am I able to respond just
Said,
to your
sure,
first
let's talk about the framing of the strategic plan and why it seems more like a wish list than a strategic plan at this particular juncture.
Yeah, and I think you're bang on there, John. I think what we're talking about right now is what I presented to you isn't a strategic plan yet. We haven't actually drafted the management plan. The management plan is going to elaborate on the guiding statements and the concepts and make it more of an operational guide. It'll include things like our operating policies. It'll include and elaborate on some of the directions that you've pointed to, and it'll definitely include an implementation strategy, which will talk about prioritization, phasing, costing, all of that stuff that you mentioned. So what we're talking about right now is a progression of work. So we're starting out with really getting the vision, objectives, outcomes, and directions, which to our, for us, I think we're using the term directions, but to us, they're actions. They're the actions that are needed to realize the outcomes that we're setting up in the management plan. But I think in terms of some of the lack of detail, that's sort of what we expect to come in the management plan in September, once we are in agreement on the concepts and the guiding statements. I think you're quite right. The trail plan and the restoration.
At that point, it would come back to Mono?
That's correct. We're doing another round of consultation.
Would it at that point come back for discussion?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think you did touch on the water management, which is critically important, as you mentioned. And water management is itself a huge undertaking. If you look at the sub-watershed study for the Headwaters watershed, of which Island Lake is a part, there's a number of recommendations in there that reference to the reservoir, two in particular. And so those have specific studies that have been identified for the reservoir and for the dam operations components. And there's sort of bigger other moving pieces that'll be integrated into the future, but they've been identified in the directions, just sort of integrating some of the already work that's underway for the reservoir.
They looking 25 years out, a water management strategy has to be part of the strategic plan. I just don't understand its present omission or even mention. I'm on the advisory panel, the provincial advisory panel on climate change. Almost all of our recommendations have to do with water. Mm-hmm. Precipitation is increasing in the Great Lakes Basin. Adjustment and resilience in the face of that is facing all of us, and we're in a different ball game now, and will be for 25 years. So thank you for. So I take it that a draft, a more complete and integrated strategic plan will come back for further review and discussion.
Correct.
And it will have costing associated with it?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Just a few other minor points in passing. Just on the site plan, which, speaking of general balance, I mean, we have, 1 or 2 pages on conservation, and then we have a 14 page fully illustrated PowerPoint presentation on site development. It kind of tells me what the strategic plan is aiming at. So I just, on the first page of it, just for your future reference, it states that the entire credit watershed is in a particular treaty land, and that is not the case. The entire credit watershed is not part of the treaty lands and territories of the Mississauga of the Credit. The watershed extends into Mono, notwithstanding where that left over to the north, north of Highway 9, and of course it includes part of the original Nottawasaga Basin by diversion, which means that it includes lands of the earlier Treaty 18 from October of 1818 with the Ojibwe Mississauga. So if you're going to use that boilerplate in your plans, I would suggest, especially with Island Lake, you get it right. That would be good. So I was wondering, Ray, this comes from one of your presentation comments. Do you have or can you employ zoning within your conservation area so that part of Island Lake could be zoned nature reserve? So this is the provincial park planning standard. And I ask this because all such areas have to face carrying capacity analysis and limits, of which I see no discussion. This is particularly worrisome when we are seeing in the headwaters here visitation rates and impacts on our natural areas throughout Mono, inspired by COVID and digital handheld devices, and it means we could be dealing with a different set of parameters with regard to visitation, such that we may need to zone internally, and we may need to think about the carrying capacity and have some sacrificial lands and have some protected lands. So I'd encourage you to think about that zoning internally. And perhaps
sorry,
that's,
John,
yes?
if I can just respond, is that we do have zoning internally, and that is something that we are also working on. We just didn't have it ready to share as part of this phase of work, but that's something that you'll see in the draft management plan. And we do have nature reserve. The 3%,
that would be great.
Yeah, the 3% of the park that is the developed area is the development zone. The rest would be sort of the natural heritage appreciation and nature reserve.
That would be terrific. So just in conclusion, I get back to my first point. So you were referred to the public survey that you conducted, and you showed a slide in particular of which was a long list, and its basic question was, which of these amenities would you like to use? So to be a curmudgeon, I would just say, it's too bad you didn't ask, which of these amenities would you like to pay for? It would just be nice to express it that way, because all of this has to be borne by the same public in terms of costs. So in conclusion, this is not yet to my way of thinking. You're not at the strategic plan point yet, and I appreciate your candid expression of that we have that to wait for. And I look forward to seeing that, and hope we can provide you with some detail and some emphases that help you get there.
Okay, very good, John. Thank you. Kate, thank you as well. Barbara, can I ask you any questions that you have, please?
Well, I don't have any questions, but I do have comments that I agree totally with John. I read what he drafted earlier today, and I think he's absolutely right. I think that what we're getting right now is just a concept where it's a preliminary plan. There's been no meat or potatoes involved in it, and I think that has to be sort of worked out before we can actually make any clear decisions. I may be wrong about this, but I don't think so. I think with what we're dealing with the monocliffe situation, for example, will indicate that we have to look longer terms at what's going on as a relationship of people moving out and into the environment. They have to be aware of the protective qualities and environmental impact. And I don't see this in this proposal. So that's my comment. That's it for me.
Oh, very good.
Hey, Kate. Hey, Bob, could I make a comment on some of the comments that John and Barbara made from the visitor management perspective that we're implementing right now?
Sure, Bill.
Yeah, so just so everyone knows, yeah, we have seen a tremendous influx of visitors coming to our conservation area. So we have deployed some strategic methodology to look at carrying capacity. So right now at Island Lake, we do have capacity limits for the park on the weekends, where we only let X number of people come in and then we shut the gates. We also have a reservation system at another one of our conservation areas that has worked tremendously well for carrying capacity and the number of people that are coming into the park at any given time. Ontario Parks have launched their reservation system at Mono Cliffs and Forks of the Credit. It goes live on Saturday, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because you will be required a reservation system. And with a number of our colleagues, other conservation authorities, they've implemented a reservation system, and that has helped control the number of people and the impact on the environment. So we are implementing carrying capacity measures as we speak, and they're working out well right now. And there's a lot more work to do.
Very good. Thank you, Bill.
Bob, sorry to interject. I was just curious if I could also address another point that John made.
Yes, please, Eric.
It's just in connection to the Conservation Authorities Act changes. And if I heard you correctly, John, you were talking about the provincial direction to focus CAs back on natural hazard or natural heritage management. So assuming I heard you correctly, I think I saw you nod up and down. Just want to point out that with the recent releases of the regulations, land management is very clearly a core mandate identified in the provincial guidance documents. So everything that we are doing here as part of management planning and our traditional daily management of conservation areas is very clearly a core mandate coming out from the province as well.
And is that a core mandate that they identify themselves as assisting in funding?
No, and since the
Right.
Harris years, they have not identified them as a source of funding or a major source of funding. So gradually we've had to get into the high 90s in terms of percentage that it's driven either by municipal levies or by fundraising and other sources of funding that come in. That's it. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Diane, can I ask you, please, if you've got any questions or comments?
Not too much outside of what's already been said. I too agree with the other members of the committee, and understanding that this is really high level and you're really looking for our opinion on your mission and vision statements and things like that. I don't really see problems with those. But aside from the personal questions I had, I really tried to think of this. You're looking for our feedback as the Environment and Natural Heritage Committee. Looking at it through that lens, there's not a whole lot for us to comment on at this point. There was a lot of planning, not so much environment and natural heritage to sort of to speak to. So I would say that going forward in the development of this plan, some things that I would be very interested in seeing are policies or practices, procedures, whatever you want to call them, regarding the invasive species and things like that, which you mentioned you answered a lot of my questions. Your presentation was very informative. Thank you for that. But you mentioned in the report that we were given the Phragmites and things like that. But I would like to, I think there was 3 things that you mentioned. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I think that should be a more extensive list and putting climate change, economic pressures, things like that, species at risk. I mean, there was like really small mention of like a few lines on snapping turtles, but I mean, I don't have an intimate knowledge of every single thing that goes on at Island Lake or every single thing that's important, like maybe John would have. And so it's difficult for me to comment from that perspective without any information. So that is something that I would like to see incorporated into the plan going forward. And things like the repairs, you mentioned the repairs for one of your buildings exceed the replacement cost. That's like super important information. I had all sorts of questions about things like that you mentioned in your presentation that if I were in your shoes, I would definitely consider putting into the plan in the future. And that's all.
Very good. Thank you, Diane. Jerry, please. Comments, questions?
I won't say it as well as John, but they were truly started to manage water, and I find that it's getting a little bit out of hand. I actually have the East Credit starts in my lower 50, and have been part of the Subwater 19 study that was kind of referenced and has gone on for a number of years and one thing and another. And I really wonder, building new amphitheaters and new structures and one thing and another, I think we need budgets, and we need to look at what the levy is going to be. In the last 5 years, I've watched the council meetings during conservation authorities presentations. In the last 5 years, there's been over the cost of living request for funds in each of those years. And yes, there's been a special little project or whatever, but whether we like it or whether we don't, people, this has to be paid for. And so if it's going to be us pay for it or future generations probably paying for it, they should know that if they're going to walk the trails and there's a broken board in the trail system, it was put there with volunteers and dollars and one thing and another. But if that has to be replaced, that's going to be public money, and I think we should be aware of all those things. So I guess I'm a bit of an old time farmer, but I've been pretty close to that. I watched that both those dams being built, and one thing and another, and it was for water management, and that was a good thing. But I wonder how overzealous we are getting with it and attracting people that are costing the local municipalities a lot of money, whether it be for transportation or whether it be for pavilions or whether it be for parking vehicles or whatever it might happen to be. I could go on and on. So we should have a budget for this. We should take a look at our levies, because councillors don't tend to do that unless you bring it to their attention. And so a delegation from any of the conservation authorities, I'm not picking on Credit Valley, but they go and make a delegation to the council, and it's pretty easy to everybody stick their hands up and say, oh yeah, 5% instead of 3%. And it soon costs a lot of money. So we're really in this thing to manage water, and whether it be for sewage or whether it be for just having water around, or whether it be for recreation or whatever. And land, I would like to say too, but that's all part of it. So that's my concerns about it as well. So John said it a lot better than I do, but I think we've got to be really aware of what is going on along those lines. I think that's all I have. I could read a lot more into that, but I won't at this point in time.
Very, very good. Thank you, Jerry. I've just got a couple of comments here, and then that I want to talk about planning committee moving forward to give you and to give Mono Council something meaningful. Um, I happen to live in the Island Lake subdivision there. Your map is up there, and in the upper right you can almost see my house, but it's just off the page there. And Bill, you remember the last time that you and I had some dealings? It was about what I call the mega pavilion. I hate to bring that up, but somebody walked that back and did the right thing. What I'm getting at here is CVC. I don't want us to forget what the second C stands for, which is conservation. And I don't want to be disrespectful, to our friends on the CVC, but there are some people in Mono who, instead of calling it Credit Valley Conservation, refer to it as Credit Valley Concerts. And that's the emphasis on the amphitheater, and there's a lot of talk amongst Mono residents that is CVC getting away from the conservation mandate and aspect of it into more things to generate money to pay the bills and that. So I think it's a concern, and it's something that we can't ignore. And that, so I was happy to see with this conceptual plan that the mega pavilion is gone because that just wasn't going to work. I don't know, this new open air pavilion, is that something new or different from the two that were built recently? Bill, can you answer that, or this?
Yeah, I can answer that, or Kate. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be similar to something that looks like that, Bob.
Okay.
The distinction, though, the distinction there, Bill, is that it would be radio free, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, when we get into the detailed design, then we'll know better. But yeah, again, because of the concerns, we implemented that in good faith. As I told you, Bob, is that it's always been radio free to address residents. So we're trying to work with residents. So that was one little thing that we had done.
And I know the term radio free, which I hadn't heard until these two new pavilions were put in there, and that's all fine and good, except we do know that some of your visitors come in with big boom boxes and the like, and it does affect the residents there, and really does not enhance the conservation aspect of Credit Valley Conservation. So, but those are some specifics that we need to get into over time. You've given a good presentation here, and we really appreciate it. And we're about an hour into the meeting now. I had asked Susan to talk with you, and maybe she talked with you, Kate. You alluded to it. The planning committee, where do I start here? Mono Council do respect the opinions of the planning committee. I've been on the Mono planning committee for over 26 years. I have a degree in urban planning, and we have given Mono advice on many things over the 26 years. And I think in only one case, they didn't listen to us. And a month after they made the wrong decision, they backtracked on it and went with the planning committee. I'm not bragging here, but I'm trying to set the scene to say, and this planning committee is no different from the others. You've got a great group of Mono residents here with a lot of knowledge and good opinions and good advice. We take it very seriously. So what I'm going to say to you is this. We need to take away what we've heard tonight, which is all very good and good discussion. we need, the committee needs to meet as a committee, and I don't have a date on that. I will organize that. But we need to sit down and put something comprehensive together, which we'll send to you. But we are an advisory committee to Mono Council. So, you know, we really, all 5 of us need to give all of this a lot of thought, put some things together, put together a well-worded, comprehensive document that will benefit you and will benefit Mono Council, if that makes sense. Yes, John.
Well said. I think we would like to take the time to get this right. I just have one parting shot, if you'd like, and that is that I would really love it if you would start thinking about how you would present the case that you have just presented in your site plan about the visitor center and a redeveloped Vicky Barron Trail right on the lakeshore. I just don't see how, or the proposed locations really communicate to the public and in general a domination over the Island Lake landscape and lakeshore. And I don't know to what purpose other than some sort of showcasing of the built environment over the natural environment. So I just hope you can make a good case, because you'll need the environmental assessments to justify it as well.
And John, I think that that's a very good point. And one of the things that we will incorporate into the Planning and Environmental Natural Heritage Committee document to the CVC and to Mono Council. So, you know, good point, and something we need to give a comprehensive analysis of all of this. Committee, am I saying that in the right way?
I think so. Yes.
Okay. So, Kate, with that in mind, and I wish that we could do this for June 24th. I'm actually away at a cottage up north for a week here. It's going to take us longer than 2 weeks. So, you know, have you got a drop dead date? And the thing is this, are you going to give this same presentation to Mono Council?
So the presentation I would envision giving Mono Council would be more holistic on the actual management plan that we would be developing. We've taken a phased approach to consultations because we're sort of developing elements along, you know, over time. So we've started with the guiding statements and the concepts. As I mentioned, we have other strategies that we need to evolve, like the restoration plan, like the trail plan. And so there's a number of different things that need to evolve and in a more wholesome draft in a management plan. And so our next presentation to council will be on the management plan.
Okay, and when do you envision that happening?
That would, well, I think we'd have to work with municipal staff first to better understand the review process of the plan and how they want to approach what the delegation or endorsement process would look like. My understanding is it could take, you know, 4 or 5 months potentially.
Okay, so then let me talk to the committee members. We can't do it in 2 weeks. We will do it. We will put our report together as fast as possible. And what we're going to give you, I'll put money on it. It will be good. I guarantee you that. This is a good group of people. What we're going to give you will be very well thought out, and it will be good. So it will be worth the wait. So
I can appreciate that, Bob. So in terms of your timings, how many weeks do you think would be appropriate for you?
well, committee, we need another meeting on this. So whether we need 3 weeks or 4 weeks, committee members think? If we meet again in a month, and we will come up with a document at that next meeting. I will promise you. Susan, we're
Yeah.
going to need your help to do that, but I know you're up to it. So, and David as well. So if we're back in a month, does that work for you?
It works for me to develop something over the next few weeks and then finalize it at the next meeting, if that makes sense to everybody else.
Well, the 10th is a Saturday, Bob. So the Monday's the 12th. That would be roughly a month from now, of July, of course.
Okay. Well, we'll work out those specifics, but I don't want to leave Kate and our friends with the CVC, thinking that giving them a false impression about how fast we can be back to it. So, Kate, can you live with around that timeline?
It's a little bit to our detriment, just because we need to sort of move on to evolving these ideas into actually drafting the management plan for September. So it's not certainly ideal for us, but I do respect that we want to hear from the committee, and we want to do our best to integrate these comments into something that works for us. But the week of the 12th is a little bit into dangerous territory, where we're starting to really evolve some of these ideas, and drafting the policies and doing costing analysis and all of that comes with it in a very short amount of time. So the further we get into July is really going to impair our ability to prepare that draft plan for September.
Okay.
Can I just interject there that
Yeah.
I may be wrong, and David Trotman, you could straighten me out on that. If we had all of our comments summarized and written up tonight, it would still have to get into and onto the agenda of Mono Council. They're meeting every 2 weeks. If it gets onto one of their agendas and they wish to amend or adjust and ask us if we have any can make some adjustments or whatnot, assuming that happens, then it's into another cycle. We already can't do it in 2 weeks. And if we try to do it in 4 weeks, I would consider it outstanding speed in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, I didn't understand that was the process. For the other two committees of council, we received direct communication from the chair of the committee. I don't believe they went through council.
Well, we can do a report on our own. We are an advisory committee to council. John, I suggest that we put a report together, and we give it to council and give it to the CVC. Council have asked us, got direction here. They've asked us to do this, so I'm happy to do it.
And report back to them, to the CA and to council at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And if council doesn't like it, well, now I'm on record of, I'm not disrespecting council, but they have asked us to have this meeting and to give our feedback to the CVC. So if the rest of the committee is okay with that, I'm happy.
That was my misunderstanding, because I thought that this was a public meeting, and a public meeting sort of requires a report back to council, but I'm mistaken in that, I guess.
No, John, I don't think you're mistaken in that, and that has been the normal thing. But the council isn't making a decision on this either. They're going to give the CVC their opinions as well. So I'm happy to do what council have asked us to do, is to have this meeting and put together some thoughts.
Right.
And if that's the wrong thing, then it falls on me, and they can fire me from this volunteer position.
Yeah.
So
good.
Okay, Kate, rather
These
than
comments will inform the
time on
CBC's
this.
plan
Sorry?
from the committee. At which time, Kate, you'll digest those comments from committee. And I'm not sure the date you're intending to come back to Mono Council, but with those comments from Planning Committee, Mono Planning Committee, integrated, shall we say, or informed to the plan, that it's at that time that plan will come back to our council, correct? So no, yeah, John, this, I don't believe, as Bob is saying, that this round of summarized aggregated comments necessarily needs to go to council with a short report from me and your recommendation. No, I think it could go right back to the CBC, Bob, as you mentioned.
And I'm happy to tell council that that's what we're doing. So
Yeah,
that
sure.
falls on me. So
So Kate, are you prepared to do a budget and present that to the council by September?
Yeah, so once we have decisions made on a lot of the projects that we've been discussing, it'll be sort of like, I think we've referred to it as Class D level costing, so high level costing estimates. We'll sort of break our projects down into phased approaches, and we'll sort of have rough estimates on how much each phase will collectively cost. So that's something we hope to start, immediately, really shortly here, and work through the month of July and August to produce that for the management plan.
Okay, because that's certainly going to be in our report. You're going to have to present budgets and one thing or another, I'm sure.
Sure.
so Jerry, that will be part of our recommendation.
Kate, could I ask one extra financial question, Kate? And that is that is the Conservation Authority in your regulations, are you permitted to establish stewardship endowments for conservation areas? And I ask this because in the organization I've worked with across the country, we have instituted this over the last 20 odd years, and it has become an invaluable a buttress against the vagaries of funding to be able to build build an endowment for a particular natural area and draw support into an endowment that can endure for 25 years. Because in 25 years, who knows whether there'll be a penny for the environment left. So I just asked you that question about endowments.
Yeah, I think Eric, you might know best to this one. Do you know offhand?
Yeah, I can answer that. Certainly through the foundation and CVC, where they're both charitable organizations, so we have the ability to establish endowments such as the ones you're talking about. We haven't done them previously, nor is there any indication that we're going to be thinking about them in the near future. One of the concerns we've had with those, although they can be specific dedicated pots of money, the enormous investment it takes to set up the principal amount in those endowment funds can often take away from dollars that we need to have available immediately. So there's examples where it's setting up endowments that are 10 or 15% of property value, or they can be set up in some other way. But they do often take a lot of resources just to get them started, just to have enough principal and interest to build off of, to be able to do even basic land management activities.
That's right.
But
It's
at a
setting
park
them
like
up. Setting them up is like water torture. You have to tax internally, and even if it's at the rate of 1 or 2% per transaction related to the conservation area, it takes a while, and you can't minimize the pain. That's quite right.
Yeah.
I agree with you totally on that.
Yeah. And frankly,
But you might be able to attract external donors that are not currently part of your supporter base.
and that's where we would go from the funding perspective. There's no doubt that if what we're looking at gets approved and gets endorsement, not only from Mono Council, Orangeville Council, our own board, there's going to be significant costs associated with it. although the province hasn't stepped up a ton in terms of regular funding, more recently they've had other funding opportunities, which we're looking at. Lots of CAs are looking at, and we often look to those sources to fund these projects all the time. And it's one of those things that endowment funds are lovely, but if we've got a donor willing to set up $1 million endowment to as seed money, we'd actually rather put that towards more immediate needs right now.
There you go. Well, you haven't learned the lessons, but that's great. I understand the rationale. Thank you.
Okay, it's approaching 8:30 now. I see, Diane, you've got your son and the twins there. Kate, you mentioned a 2-year-old you probably have to pay some attention to, and others have to. So with this, let me say this. Once we're done here tomorrow, I will organize. We will have another meeting of the planning committee. We will put to paper our thoughts about this and get them to you, and that. So leave that with me and with the committee, please, and we'll sort it out and let you know. Committee members, any other comments or anything? Or with this, can we close the public meeting? And are we okay? It looks like we're okay.
Thank you all.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. A lot of information, and that I really appreciate it. Again, you have our commitment. We will do it. We will do a good job, and we will get it to you in a timely manner. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Bob, and for the committee for hearing our presentation today.
Yep. No, thank you. Thanks to all the committee members. Everybody has put a lot of time into this. These are important issues. So very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night. Committee members, we got two other things here, and then we can let Diane take care of her kids. Thank you, committee. Number 6, other business. Anybody have any other business? Listen, it's late. We'll sort out when we can have another committee meeting tomorrow or the next day, if that is okay with everybody. Okay.
Yes. In terms of other business, I would only add, with Barbara's indulgence, that since our last meeting, the entire matter of public visitation to Mono Center, Mono Cliffs, the Hockley Valley, provincial parks and nature reserves has been a disastrous roller coaster ride of hopes and expectations, and most of them unrequited. But last weekend was finally reported by a number of people as one which allowed people in Mono Center to actually smile at their neighbors again for the first time in quite some time. So more detail later, perhaps, if anybody wants, but it's just an incredible effort to try and fend off the hordes of malevolent environment ingesters.
It's been totally unbelievable, and I don't think it's over yet.
Right.
I
Setting
could
the
have
stage.
fortunate if I'd opened up my property as a parking lot.
Put some
I enjoyed
sunflowers in it, get a couple there.
I enjoyed your pollinator comments, John.
Okay. And anything else from anybody else? Seeing none. Thank you, committee. Job well done, as usual. Dave, sorry, did you have something?
No, I'm only to say that, well, it's general comment. We do have a couple of projects I think that will be coming to committee soon enough, there's a wedding venue, you're aware of it. And I'm gapping on something else. Is it that one? Microbrew you've dealt with already, so it'd be that one. I guess that's what I'm thinking of. We'll let you know. We have got some comments back from our engineers, and I have how that ought to proceed anyway, but that's about it.
Oh, very good. Anything, in my opinion, anything we can do to speed up beer production in Mono, I think we're all for that.
I'm dreading the parking that's going to go on Mono Center Road once that opens up as well. So let's let sleeping dogs lie. Let them proceed at a slow pace. Hope for the winter. People won't come up. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Goodness knows. All right, with that, I don't think we need a motion to adjourn. We'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your great work on this. And that I'll be in touch. And so we all have a lot to think about. John, your 3 pages here, spectacular. Thank you. Anyhow, Barbara, sorry.
I'm just saying thank you to John because it was well thought out. I thought the presentation itself was very weak. We needed more substance.
Right, and we did hear that, well, they're just presenting us with a bunch of lists at this point, and they're nowhere near the actual draft plan yet. So the more grist we give them for their mill, perhaps the better.
And I was just going to say that if we give them a long list of things that need to be addressed and dealt with, then we'll have done a good job as the Planning, Environment, Natural Heritage Committee. So with that, let's thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Good to see you all.
Have a good night. Thank you,
Thank
Susan.
you.
Thank you, David. Keep well.
Bye.
Bye.